Chapter 1. What if the universe began, not with a bang, but a whisper? Close your eyes for a moment and let the noise of the day begin to drain away, down through the soles of your feet, into the quiet earth. And as it does, I want you to picture not the vast black silent expanse we so often imagine when we think of the cosmos, but something else, something simpler. Picture instead the edge of the sea, not a turbulent, storm-tossed sea, but a calm, endless one. At the precise moment when the evening mist begins to bleed into the surface of the water, so that you can no longer tell where the air ends and the sea begins. A single, unified, gentle presence, a primordial moisture. And now, imagine that this is not just a scene on our planet. Imagine that this is the universe in its infancy, before stars, before planets, before light itself. Just a quiet, limitless, nurturing ocean. This was the first great secret whispered by a man standing on the shores of the Mediterranean, under a sky brilliant with unfamiliar stars, 2,600 years ago. His name was Thales of Miletus, and his question, his breathtakingly simple proposition, was this: what if everything, you, me, these thoughts, the stars above, what if it all came from water? This wasn't a scientific hypothesis in the way we'd understand it today, with laboratories and data. This was something more profound, more felt. It was a philosopher's intuition, born from a life of watching the world. Thales saw how water was the agent of change, how the river silt nourished the plains, how the rain coaxed life from the dry soil, how the morning dew clung to a spider's web like a string of tiny, perfect worlds. He saw that without water, there was only barrenness, and with it, there was potential, life, motion. And so, he took a leap of thought that would echo for millennia. He proposed that this essential, life-giving principle wasn't just a feature of our world. It was the fundamental substance of all reality. The archa, the originating source. Think of the courage that must have taken. In a world explained by capricious gods, a thunderbolt from Zeus, a trident strike from Poseidon, Thales dared to look at the natural world and see a pattern, a logic. He was searching for a unity behind the dazzling diversity of experience, and he found it in the most humble, the most common, the most vital of elements. There's a deep peace in that idea, isn't there? A sense of belonging. It suggests that the same principle that feeds the great oak tree also spins the galaxies, that the same essence that flows in your veins also makes up the distant sun. We are not separate from the cosmos. We are a manifestation of its most basic, flowing nature. We are the universe, become conscious of itself for a little while. But let's not imagine Thales as some stone statue in a museum, cold and perfect. He was a man. He walked the crowded, smelly harbors of Miletus, a city of traders and sailors and slaves. He felt the same sun on his skin, tasted the same salt on the air. And he must have felt, as all great thinkers do, a profound solitude. To see the world so differently from everyone around you is a lonely burden. They would have laughed, perhaps, called him a fool for suggesting the ground they stood on was ultimately a kind of thickened water. But he held fast to his vision. He was listening to a different music, a quieter, more ancient rhythm. The rhythm of the tides, the rhythm of the cycle of evaporation and rain, the rhythm of life emerging from the deep. And this is where the idea becomes more than a historical curiosity. It becomes a mirror for us, here, now, in the quiet of this night. Because we too spend our lives navigating a world of dazzling diversity, a world of noise, of conflicting demands, of fractured attention. We feel pulled in 100 different directions until we feel we might simply come apart. But Thales' whisper from the past offers a different way. It invites us to look for the unifying principle in our own chaos. What is the water of your life? What is the single, flowing, essential substance from which all the complexities of your day emerge? Is it your breath, the steady tidal rhythm of inhalation and exhalation that anchors you to the present? Is it your attention, the clear, still pool of focus that when you can access it makes all tasks simpler, all burdens lighter? Or is it something else, something deeper, a sense of purpose, or love, or curiosity? When you find that source, that wellspring, everything else becomes a modification of it. The anxieties are like waves on the surface of your deep ocean, real but temporary. The frustrations are like silt stirred up from the bottom. They will, in time, settle, and the water will clear again. Your essential nature remains, fluid and adaptable. This is the quiet gift Thales offers, a sense of underlying cohesion, a knowledge that beneath the hard, separate forms of your life, the appointments, the responsibilities, the worries, there is a single, flowing, interconnected reality. You are not a collection of fragmented pieces. You are a whole, a quiet, conscious eddy in the great slow river of the world. And as you feel that, feel the truth of it seeping into your muscles, into your bones, you can let the day's hard edges soften and dissolve back into the source from which they came, back into the quiet, nurturing water of your own being. And as that sense of fluid unity settles around you, a soft and comfortable blanket, another question begins to form in the stillness. A question not about the source of things, but about the nature of the mind that dares to perceive it. If the universe is water, what does that make the thought that conceives of it as such? Chapter 2. Is a mind that sees water in the stars the same substance it perceives? There's a moment just before sleep truly takes us when the boundary between the thinker and the thought begins to blur, when the dreamer becomes part of the dream. It's a fragile, porous state, and it's in this state that we can approach the next, deeper layer of Thales' secret. We've considered the world as water, but now, consider the mind that conceived it, the consciousness of Thales himself, the flickering, wet, electrical storm inside the bone house of his skull. What was it? Was it separate from the waterlogged universe it was observing? Or was it itself the universe's water, become conscious, become self-aware? This is the silent, profound question that lies beneath his philosophy. Is the knower made of the same stuff as the known? Thales is often called the first scientist, the first philosopher, because he looked for a natural cause for natural events. But that's only half the story. The real revolution was that he included himself in the equation. He wasn't a spirit looking down on a material world. He was of the world. His thoughts, his reason, his very capacity for wonder. These were not supernatural gifts from the gods. They were, he believed, properties of the fundamental substance. He famously said, "All things are full of gods." It's a puzzling statement, until you see it not as a retreat into superstition, but as a poetic leap. He wasn't talking about Zeus and Hera. He was talking about an animating principle, a soul of the world. He saw that a magnet could move iron. It had a kind of life, a purpose. He saw that amber, when rubbed, could attract straw. It held a hidden power. And if these things had a trace of this animating force, this psyche, then surely the fundamental substance, water, was brimming with it. It was alive, intelligent, aware. So when Thales thought about water, he wasn't just thinking about H2O. He was thinking about a substance imbued with the capacity for mind. And therefore his own mind was not an alien invader in a dead universe. It was the universe coming to know itself. His thought was the ocean forming a wave that could, for a moment, look back upon the ocean and understand its own nature. This is perhaps the most calming idea one can ever entertain. It means that your loneliness is an illusion. Your feeling of being a separate, isolated consciousness trapped inside a body, looking out at an indifferent cosmos. It's a trick of the light. In truth, you are the cosmos looking in at itself. Your awareness is not yours alone. It is a localized expression of a universal awareness. The same aliveness that spins the planets in their orbits is beating your heart. The same intelligence that designed the snowflake is arranging your thoughts. Picture Thales again, an old man now, his face lined by the sun and salt wind, sitting on a pier, his feet dangling just above the water. He is not just a man looking at the sea. He is the sea, in the temporary and beautiful form of a man, looking at itself. The boundary between his inner world and the outer world is a courtesy, a convenient fiction. His mind, with all its memories, its regrets, its soaring ideas, is simply the water of the universe, organized in a particular exquisite way. And when his body eventually fails, that organization will loosen, and the water that was him will return to the great circulating system. It will become rain, then river, then sap in a tree, then vapor again. The pattern that was Thales will be gone, but the substance, the aware and living substance, will continue forever. And so it is with you, lying here in the dark. The day you've just lived, its tensions, its small victories, its fleeting conversations, all of it was a complex dance of this intelligent substance you call you. And now, as you prepare for sleep, you are preparing to loosen that organization, to let the sharp edges of your individual self dissolve back into the source. This is not a death. It is a homecoming, a return each night to the fundamental state. Your breathing slows, and you are aligning with the great, slow breath of the world. The thoughts that drift through your mind, unanchored and strange, are not merely your thoughts. They are the murmuring of the deep, ancient water from which you came. There is nothing to fear in letting go. You are not surrendering yourself to a void. You are merging with the very thing that you are. The knower is the known. The dreamer is the dream. And in that realization, there is a peace so profound, so total, that it feels less like an emotion and more like a law of the universe, a truth that was here long before you and will remain long after. And as that peace deepens, carrying you toward the threshold of dreams, one final whisper remains, a question about the legacy of such a thought. What remains of a man when his individual wave has long since subsided back into the sea? Chapter 3. What survives of us is not the stone, but the ripple. We build our lives, don't we, on the idea of permanence? We want our work to last, our names to be remembered, our mark on the world to be indelible. We build with stone, with steel, with legal documents, and digital footprints, hoping to create something that will outlive the brief flicker of our own existence. Thales, like all of us, had a physical life. He walked, he talked, he ate, he slept, He had a body, subject to the same decay as any other. And that body, that specific temporary organization of water and earth, is long, long gone. Not a single atom that was part of Thales, the man, remains in its original form. They have cycled through the earth countless times since. If survival is a matter of physical continuity, then Thales is utterly, completely gone. But is that true? Listen to the silence around you. In that silence, his idea is alive. The ripple he created 26 centuries ago is still moving through the mind of the world. It is moving through your mind right now as you hover on the edge of sleep. Thales left no writings. We know of him only through the reports of others, like Aristotle, who wrote about him generations later. His physical legacy is zero, and yet his intellectual legacy is the very bedrock of the Western world. He started a conversation. He cast a single small stone into the pond of human ignorance, and the ripples spread outward in ever-widening circles. His student, Anaximander, took his idea and refined it, proposing a different fundamental substance, the apeiron, the boundless. And then Anaximander's student, Anaximenes, proposed air. Each was a ripple, a new vibration emanating from that original splash. This chain of teacher and student, of critical thought building upon critical thought, is the very essence of philosophy and science. It all began with one man's courage to say, "I think the world works like this," and to give a reason based on observation, not on myth. What survives of us, then? It is not the stone of our monuments. Those will weather and crack. It is the quality of the ripples we set in motion. Thales's ripple was the idea of a rational, unified, comprehensible universe. It was the idea that the human mind, flawed and temporary as it is, can discern the logos, the underlying order of things. This was a radical act of hope. He bequeathed to us not an answer, but a method, not a dogma, but a question. And a question is a living thing. It is far more durable than an answer. An answer is a full stop. A question is an open door. It invites. It compels. It breathes. As you lie here, your own life spread out behind you like a map. Consider the ripples you have created today. They may feel insignificant. A moment of patience with a stranger. A word of encouragement to a colleague. A silent decision to be kinder to yourself. Or perhaps a ripple of frustration, of anxiety. Those ripples are real too. But know this, you are constantly casting stones into the pond. The quality of your attention, the intention behind your actions, the character of your thoughts, these are the stones. And the ripples they create extend far beyond your field of vision, intersecting with other ripples, creating an impossibly complex and beautiful interference pattern. That is the story of our shared world. Thales could never have imagined his idea would be soothing a man to sleep in the 21st century. He was just being true to his own observation, his own reason. He was tending his own garden of thought with integrity, and that was enough. So, as you finally surrender to the pull of sleep, let go of the need for grand, permanent monuments. Release the weight of having to be something solid and unchanging. You are water. You are flow. You are a temporary, beautiful pattern. Your legacy is not in what you build to last, but in the quality of the waves you send forth from your brief, central point in the pond. Be a gentle ripple, a ripple of clarity, a ripple of peace. Let your last conscious thought be the casting of a smooth, quiet stone into the dark water of the night. And then let go and watch as the ripples spread wider and wider, touching shores you will never see in a future you cannot imagine, becoming part of the great, silent, intelligent ocean, from which all things come, and to which all things, gently, return. Chapter 4. What if the greatest rebellion is to simply stand still and observe? Close your eyes for a moment and just listen, not to my voice, but to the world that carries it, the low, almost imperceptible hum of the device you're using, the distant sigh of a passing car, or the gentle creak of your own home settling into the night. These are the sounds of a world in motion, a world of relentless doing. We are taught from our first breath that value is found in action, in building, in moving, in acquiring, in speaking. Our days are measured in tasks completed, distances crossed, words exchanged. To stop, to truly stop, feels like a kind of surrender, a failure. But what if I were to tell you that the very first spark of what we now call science, philosophy, the very enterprise of human understanding, was not born from a frantic doing, but from a profound and deeply rebellious act of stillness? I want you to picture a man, not a statue of white marble, clean and remote, but a man of flesh and breath, Thales of Miletus. His skin is weathered by the sun and the salt spray of the Aegean Sea. His hands are not soft. They have known the feel of rope and the weight of traded goods. He is a man of commerce, of practical matters. He walks through a world that is loud with gods, a world where every lightning strike is a wrathful gesture from Zeus, where the rumble of the earth is Poseidon's anger, where the sun is a chariot pulled by fire steeds across the dome of the sky. Explanation is everywhere, and it is deafening. It is a world animated by caprice, by stories that demand appeasement, not understanding. And this man, Thales, he does something extraordinary. He simply stops. He stands on the shore, perhaps, watching the waves curl and fall, and he refuses the easy answer. He refuses to see a god in the water. He looks past the story, and he begins to observe the pattern, the rhythm. He sees the tides pull, the way the water changes the land grain by grain, the way it reflects the sky, not as a mere mirror, but as a substance that holds the light within itself. This is his rebellion. In a world shouting of divine wills, he chooses to listen to the whisper of the water itself. His revolution is one of quiet attention. Imagine the courage in that, to stand against the entire weight of your culture's imagination, not with a sword, not with a loud proclamation, but with a quiet question, a question born from simply watching. He wasn't in a library. Those were scarce. He wasn't in a university. Such things did not exist. He was on a muddy bank or in a dusty marketplace, his brow furrowed not in prayer, but in thought. A thought that was, in its essence, a quiet heresy. What if this is not about WHO, but about how? What if the world operates not on whimsy, but on a principle that can be seen, if only one has the patience to look? And this is where we find our own reflection in this ancient silence. When was the last time you truly stood still? I don't mean pausing to check your phone. I mean a stillness that is an active state of being, a rebellion against the frantic pace that defines our modern world. Our gods are different. The god of productivity, the god of constant connection, the god of algorithmic urgency. But the noise is just as deafening. We are swept along in a current of notifications and obligations, our minds churning with the chaos of the day until we collapse into a sleep that is less a rest and more a cessation of activity. But Thales offers us another way. He invites us to his shoreline. He suggests that the path to understanding, to peace, perhaps even to a sense of the sacred, begins not with adding more noise, but with cultivating a deliberate silence. It is in the space between our thoughts that a new pattern might emerge. The pattern of our own breath, steady and tidal. The pattern of the night sounds outside the window, a symphony of existence that has been playing all along, beneath the din of our anxiety. What if, by standing still, we are not surrendering? What if we are, in fact, joining the most ancient and noble of human quests, the quest to truly see the world before we rush to change it? So tonight, as you lie here in the dark, grant yourself the permission that Thales claimed for himself, the permission to be still, to observe the slow dance of shadows on the ceiling, to feel the weight of your body on the bed, supported by the earth, which is itself supported by what? Don't seek an answer. Simply hold the question. Let the need for action, for conclusion, for resolution drift away, like a boat untethered from the shore. Your only task is to watch it go. The greatest rebellion against the chaos of the day is this simple, profound act of observation. It is how we begin to hear the universe not as a cacophony of demands, but as a single, flowing, intelligible thing, a thing of which we are a part. And in that belonging, there is a deep and abiding calm. And so, as that act of quiet observation begins to soften the edges of your world, as the noise of the day recedes like a tide going out, it leaves something behind. It leaves a space, a silence, fertile and dark, like the soil after a rain. And into that silence, a question can be planted, a question that seems at first impossibly large. For if the world can be understood by simply looking, what does that mean for the nature of the ideas we unearth? What is the substance of a thought? And could a single, quiet one truly be strong enough to hold the weight of the entire sky? Chapter 5. Could a single, quiet idea hold the weight of the entire sky? Picture the sky above Miletus, a deep, unending blue, an expanse that feels both empty and full. To the people of that time, it was a dome, a solid thing, holding back the waters of the great celestial ocean. It was a roof, and a heavy one. The weight of that belief was immense. It shaped their navigation, their religion, their very place in the cosmos, small creatures, living under a magnificent divine ceiling. To question the nature of the sky was not just intellectual. It was an architectural risk. It was to risk the whole universe collapsing down upon you. And then Thales. After his long stillness, after his observation of water, how it becomes mist, becomes cloud, becomes rain, becomes river, becomes life itself, he formulates his quiet idea. Everything is water. It seems to our modern ears almost childish in its simplicity. We know it to be incorrect. But we are looking at the conclusion, not feeling the seismic shift of the premise. The genius was not in the answer, but in the ACT. He looked at the vast, solid earth beneath his feet. He looked at the immense, fiery sun. He looked at the deep, star-strewn sky. And he dared to propose that they were all made of the same fundamental substance as the humble water of the harbor. This was not a small thought. This was an idea of colossal strength. It was an idea that sought to unify. In a world of infinite causes and countless gods, each governing their own domain, Thales proposed a single, underlying principle. It was the first time a human being attempted to support the entire cosmos, the weight of the sky itself, on a single elegant pillar of thought. He was replacing the many straining arms of the gods with one profound, natural unity. Think of the solitude of that moment, to be the first person to ever think such a thing, to have no precedent, no textbook, no colleague to reassure you that you aren't mad, just the evidence of your senses and the courage of your own reason. He would have stood there, this practical man, looking out at the world he thought he knew and seen it transformed. The rock was not just rock, it was water sleeping. The cloud was not just a cloud, it was water dreaming. The fire of the stars? Perhaps water remembering its own light. He saw the world as a continuous flowing whole. He saw kinship where others saw separation. And here, in the quiet of your night, you can feel the echo of that idea. Because we too live under a heavy sky. Not a bronze dome, but a sky heavy with complexity, with fragmentation, with 1,000 contradictory voices telling us what is true. Our world can feel like a collection of disconnected problems, a broken politics, a changing climate, a personal worry, a global anxiety. They feel like separate weights, each one bearing down on us. What Thales offers us is not his answer, but his method, the method of unification, the search for a single calming principle beneath the apparent chaos. What is the fundamental substance of your life? Not the events, not the anxieties, but the underlying current that gives them meaning. Is it love? Is it curiosity? Is it a simple, enduring presence? When the sky of your worries feels like it will crush you, can you find that one quiet idea to hold it up? The idea that perhaps all these fragmented troubles are not separate, that they are all manifestations of a single, flowing reality, a reality that is, at its core, manageable, understandable, even beautiful. Thales' idea was a cradle. It held the infant wonder of humanity and rocked it gently, whispering that the universe is not a terrifying mystery, but a puzzle that can be approached. It told us that we belong here, that the substance of the stars and the substance of our bodies are not strangers to one another. This is the comfort he bequeaths to us across 2,500 years, the comfort that a single, clear thought, born from patience and observation, can be the strongest thing in the world, strong enough to hold up the sky. And as that thought settles over you, granting a profound sense of belonging to the cosmos, it invites one final, gentle question. A question not about the universe itself, but about our place within its often overwhelming narrative. When the world shouts of chaos, what is it that we can learn from the silence that Thales taught us to hear? Chapter 6. When the world shouts of chaos, what do you hear in the silence beneath? There is a story told about Thales. It's a small story, almost a joke. They say that while he was walking along, gazing up at the stars, pondering the nature of that great unified cosmos, he fell into a ditch, a muddy, undignified ditch. A serving girl saw him and laughed, saying, "How can you know what is in the heavens when you don't even see what is at your own feet?" It's told as a parable against impractical intellectuals, men with their heads in the clouds, but I think we have been reading it wrong all this time. Because the real lesson is not his fall, it is his response. We are not told that he cursed the ditch, or was embarrassed, or gave up his stargazing. He simply got up. He brushed the mud from his robes, and he likely looked back up at the sky. The ditch was a temporary reality. The cosmos was an eternal one. The world shouted at Thales all the time. It shouted with political turmoil, with pirate raids on the coast, with the simple daily chaos of life and death in the ancient world. It shouted with the laughter of a serving girl, pointing out his very human clumsiness. But Thales had cultivated an inner silence, a silence born from his conviction that beneath the chaos there was a pattern, a logos. And so when the world shouted, he did not shout back. He listened for the silence beneath. He listened for the signal in the noise. For us, the shouting is constant. It is a digital ditch, and we are all falling into it every hour of every day. The shouting of headlines, of social media outrage, of personal failures, of global crises. It is a chaos that feels absolute, overwhelming, and designed to keep us in a state of perpetual anxiety. It is the modern equivalent of 1,000 capricious gods, each demanding our attention, our fear, our sacrifice. To lie here now, in the dark, is perhaps to feel the echo of that shouting in the tired synapses of your brain, the residue of the day's chaos. But Thales asks us to consider a radical possibility. What if the chaos is not the true state of things? What if it is merely the surface phenomenon, the whitecaps on the ocean? His great insight was that the fundamental nature of reality, the water, the arche, was a single, cohesive, orderly substance. The chaos is what happens to that substance when it is acted upon by wind and light and gravity. The chaos is real, but it is not fundamental. The fundamental reality is the deep, calm, unified water beneath. So, the practice he leaves us with is this. When the world shouts of chaos, we must train our ears to listen past the shout. We must listen for the silence beneath. What does that silence sound like? It sounds like your own heartbeat, steady and rhythmic, a pattern that has continued since before you were born. It sounds like your breath flowing in and out, a tide that needs no conscious command. It is the silence in the space between your thoughts, the awareness that exists before the anxiety forms itself into words. This is not a metaphorical exercise. It is a sensory one. It is the direct perception of the underlying order of your own being. Thales heard the universe whispering its secrets in the language of geometry, in the predictable turning of the seasons, in the slow, patient cycles of the natural world. We can hear it too, in the unwavering laws of physics that keep the planets in their dance, in the genetic code that unfolds a seed into a tree, in the mathematical certainty that 2 + 2 will always equal 4. The chaos is the weather. The silence beneath is the climate. The chaos is the plot of the story. The silence beneath is the grammar, the syntax, the unshakable rules that make the story intelligible in the first place. As you drift now towards sleep, let the shouting of the day become like that serving girl's laughter, a distant, fleeting sound. It has no power over the vast, silent cosmos within you. Your body, mostly water, remembers Thales' truth. It is part of the great flowing unity. The anxieties, the worries, the fragments of chaos, they are just the surface agitation. Let them be. Don't fight them. Just sink down beneath them into the deep, quiet, dark water of your own fundamental nature. There is no need to solve anything tonight. No need to figure it out. Your only task is to listen past the noise, and to hear what has been true for all time. The universe is not chaotic. It is a story, and you are not a stranger in it. You are made of its very words. And in that knowing, there is a peace that can hold you, long after my voice has faded into the silence from which it came. Chapter 7. What thirst in the human soul made us look at rain and see the cosmos? Close your eyes for a moment and just listen to the sound of water. If you have a tap nearby, imagine it, a single drop falling into a silent basin, or the rain against the window pane. It is the most common sound on our planet, the most common substance. We wash with it, we drink it, we swim in it. It is so utterly mundane. And yet, what if I told you that this simple, everyday element was once seen as the secret of existence? Not by a mystic in a cave, but by the first philosopher, a man who stood on a shore not so different from your own mind tonight, looking at the waves, and saw not an end, but a beginning. What kind of thirst, not of the body, but of the soul, drives a person to find the origin of everything in something so simple? What were we as a species so desperately missing that the answer had to be water? Imagine him, Thales of Miletus, not as a statue, not as a name in a dusty book, but as a man walking along the shore of the Aegean Sea, the salt air a familiar taste, the shingle crunching under his sandals. He was a man of commerce, of politics, a practical mind. He could predict eclipses, navigate by the stars. He knew the world of things. But his mind was restless. It was a mind that refused to stop at the shoreline of the obvious, while others saw the ocean as a barrier, or a source of fish, or a path for trade. Thales looked at it and saw a question so profound it was almost a form of madness. What if all of this, the stars above, the earth beneath, the very air in his lungs, what if it all came from this? This wasn't a scientific hypothesis in the way we understand it. It was a poetic leap, a breathtaking act of imagination. Before Thales, the world was explained by gods. Zeus hurled lightning, Poseidon shook the earth. The universe was a drama of personalities, capricious and unpredictable. It was a story that placed humanity at the mercy of forces we could only beg or appease. But Thales offered a different story, a story where the universe was not a capricious kingdom, but a coherent whole. And its fundamental principle was not a god on a mountain, but a substance you could hold in your hands. Water. Think of the sheer audacity, the sheer comfort of that idea. The world is not chaos. It is not a collection of random events. It is one thing, transforming itself. The cloud becomes the rain becomes the river becomes the sea becomes the mist becomes the cloud. It is a perfect, endless cycle. The solid earth to Thales must therefore be a kind of thickened water, the air a kind of vapor, the fire of the stars, perhaps a brilliant, rarefied form of it. Everything is in relationship. Everything is connected. It is a universe that makes sense. And this is where we find that thirst, that deep human longing. Because a world explained by gods is a world of fear and uncertainty. You never know if you have sacrificed enough, prayed enough. But a world explained by a single, underlying substance, that is a world you can, in principle, understand. It is a world where the human mind has a place, where observation and reason are the keys to the kingdom. Thales, in that one simple, beautiful, and ultimately wrong idea, gave us the greatest gift, the idea that the universe is intelligible, that it operates by principles we can seek out. He traded superstition for curiosity. He traded fear for wonder. And isn't that a thirst we still feel today? In the quiet of the night, when the anxieties of the day press in, when the world feels fragmented and chaotic, isn't there a part of us that longs for that single, unifying principle? Not necessarily water, but a sense that it all holds together, that the pieces fit. Thales' water is a metaphor for that longing. It is the soul's desire for a cohesive narrative. We look at the complexity of our lives, the success, the failure, the love, the loss, and we thirst for the single, quiet stream from which it all flows. We want to see the water in the stone, the connection between the drop and the ocean. Thales wasn't just talking about the cosmos. He was giving voice to the deepest need of the thinking human heart, the need for a story that makes sense of the noise. So, as you drift towards sleep, think not of the answers you lack, but of the profound and beautiful thirst that makes you ask the questions in the first place. That thirst is your humanity. It is the ripple of Thales' own longing, echoing across 2,600 years, right into the quiet of your room tonight. And so, from that first great thirst, from that initial courageous gaze at the common and the cosmic, a silence grows, a new kind of silence. Not the silence of not knowing, but the silence that comes before a question, the fertile ground from which all understanding must grow, which leads us to a truth even more fundamental than the answer Thales proposed. Chapter 8 is the most radical idea, not the answer, but the courage to ask. We often glorify the answer, the eureka moment, the solution that cracks the code. But tonight, I want you to consider the space before that, the quiet, terrifying, and profoundly lonely space of the question itself. Because before Thales declared water to be the origin of all things, he had to do something far more revolutionary. He had to stand in the marketplace of his own mind, amidst the clamor of centuries of tradition, and commit the ultimate act of intellectual bravery. He had to say, "I do not know," and in that admission, he created a new kind of person, the philosopher, the lover of wisdom, not the possessor of it. So, I ask you, in a world that so desperately demands certainty, is the most radical act not to have the right answer, but to possess the courage to ask a question that has no answer at all? Picture the world Thales inherited. It was a world explained. Every natural event, from the sprouting of a seed to the crash of thunder, had its reason in the will of a god. The stories were complete. The myths were the textbooks of the age. To ask, "Why does the sun rise?" was not a scientific inquiry. It was a theological one. The answer was, because Helios drives his chariot across the sky. It was a story rich with imagery and meaning. It provided comfort. It provided order. To challenge that was not merely to be wrong, it was to be impious. It was to risk chaos, to ask a question like, "What is the world made of?" Instead of, "Which God made the world?" was to pull a thread that could unravel the entire tapestry of reality as people knew it. And this is where we find the true birthplace of Western thought. Not in the answer, water, but in the silent mental shift that made the question possible. It was the shift from mythos to logos, from story to reason. Thales looked at the myth of Oceanus, the river that encircled the world, and he performed a quiet act of alchemy. He stripped away the personality. He removed the chariots, the tridents, and the tempers of the gods. He looked at the water itself. He asked not who, but what. And in doing so, he changed the direction of human curiosity forever. This courage is a quiet one. It doesn't always look like heroism. It looks like a man staring at a pool of water, lost in thought, while the practical world walks by, shaking its head. There's a famous story that Thales, while gazing at the stars, fell into a well. A young Thracian servant girl laughed at him for being so intent on the heavens that he could not see what was at his feet. The story is often told to mock the absent-minded intellectual, but I think it misses the point entirely. The joke is on the girl and on all of us who are so focused on the practical, immediate world that we never look up. Thales was willing to risk the embarrassment of the fall because the question he was asking was worth any amount of ridicule. The courage to ask is the courage to appear foolish. It is the courage to be misunderstood. And isn't this a courage we need more than ever? We live in an age of answers, a torrent of information. We have opinions on everything, often before we've even fully formed a question. We are encouraged to have a stance, to pick a side, to be certain. But true growth, true depth, lies in the fertile soil of uncertainty, in the willingness to say, I don't know, to live in the question. What is my life really about? What matters when everything else is stripped away? These are Thalesian questions. They have no easy answers. They require us to stand at the well of our own existence, look up at the stars of our potential, and risk the fall. The radical act is to resist the easy answer, the prefabricated myth of a life well lived, and to ask your own question from your own quiet center. The answer may change over time, but the courage to ask, that is the foundation upon which a conscious life is built. So tonight, give yourself permission to not know, to simply wonder. That wondering space is not empty. It is full of potential. It is the silent, sacred workshop of the soul. And from that workshop, from the quiet courage of a single question, a new landscape begins to form. Not a landscape of gods, nor even of immediate answers, but an internal map, a map drawn with the only reliable instrument we ever truly possess. Chapter 9. What map do we draw? When the only compass is a quiet mind. Once the old maps are burned, the maps drawn by tradition, by authority, by the comforting lines of inherited stories, what then? You are left with a vast, uncharted territory, the world itself. And the only tools you have are your own senses, your own reason, and the deep, quiet voice of your own mind. This was the wilderness Thales entered. He had dismissed the gods as the primary cause. He had asked the fundamental question. Now came the real work, the work of observation, of building a new understanding from the ground up, from the water up. Without a divine cartographer to guide him, how does a person begin to draw a new map of reality? And what does that process tell us about the terrain of our own inner lives? Thales's map was drawn with the lines of analogy. He observed the world and saw patterns. He saw that water could exist as a solid, a liquid, and a gas. He saw that life, plants, animals, humans, could not exist without it. He saw that the earth, in his geographical understanding, was largely surrounded by it. So, he reasoned by analogy. If water is so fundamental to the processes of life, and if it can take on so many forms, could it not be the fundamental form of everything? It was a map drawn from the features he could see, extrapolated to explain the features he could not. It was human. It was flawed, but it was his. It was based on evidence, however scant, rather than revelation. This is the profound transition from receiving a map to drawing your own. It is the move from passivity to activity. It is the essence of intellectual adulthood, and it is a deeply personal, often solitary endeavor. Imagine Thales in his study, or more likely, walking the coast. There is no one to confer with, no textbook to consult. He is alone with the cosmos. The only sound is the wind and the waves, and the quieter sound of his own thoughts connecting. He is using his mind as a compass, not a compass that points north, but one that points toward coherence, toward a picture that makes sense. He is testing his idea against the world, and the world, in its way, is whispering back. This is the work we are all called to do, not with the cosmos, but with our own lives. We are born into a world of given maps, maps of what success looks like, what a good life entails, what we should want, what we should fear. And for a time, we follow them. But there often comes a moment, a crisis, a quiet disappointment, a surge of inexplicable joy, when we realize the map we've been given does not match the terrain we are actually walking. The old authorities no longer suffice. The old stories no longer resonate. And we are left, like Thales, on a shore, with a blank parchment and the necessity to draw our own map. What is your compass, then? It is that same quiet mind. It is the patient observation of your own experience. What truly nourishes you? What drains you? What ideas feel like your own and which feel borrowed? What brings a sense of coherence to the scattered events of your days? This is not a process of frantic searching. It is a process of gentle attention. It is looking at the water of your own life, the flow of your days, the solid ground of your values, the evaporating mists of your worries, and looking for the underlying pattern, the fundamental principle, your Archie. It won't be water. It might be connection. It might be creativity. It might be service. It might be peace. The map you draw will be uniquely yours, based on the analogies you find between your inner truth and the outer world. Thales' map was wrong in its particulars, but it was eternally right in its method. It was right because it was brave, because it was based on observation, and because it trusted the human mind to seek order in the cosmos. Your map does not need to be perfect. It only needs to be authentic. It needs to be drawn by your own hand, guided by your own quiet compass. So as sleep draws near and the boundaries of the day soften, ask yourself not for a destination, but for the courage to pick up the pencil, to look at the blank space, not with fear, but with possibility. The most beautiful maps are not those that show every detail, but those that chart a course toward a truer, more coherent self. And that is a journey that never really ends. It only deepens, like the ocean, into quieter and more profound waters. Rest now. The map can wait for the morning. For now, simply trust that you hold the compass. Chapter 10. What if the first truth was not a thing, but a relationship? Close your eyes for a moment and just listen, not to my voice, but to the silence that cradles it. And in that silence, see if you can feel it, the most ancient of memories. Not a memory of the mind, but of the body, the memory of floating, weightless, suspended in a warm, dark, silent ocean, a primal home, before air, before light, before the first cry that filled your lungs. It is a memory we all carry in the very water of our cells, a ghost of a feeling. And it is this ghost, this quiet, bodily knowing, that a man named Thales, walking the dusty shores of Miletus 2,600 years ago, might have been touching when he looked at the world and whispered his great secret: everything is water. We hear that today, and we might think of chemistry, of H2O. We might think he was simply wrong, that he reduced a complex universe to a simple element. But what if we are the ones who have reduced it? What if Thales was not speaking of a chemical substance, but of a relationship? What if he was pointing not to a recipe, but to a kinship? Picture him, not as a statue in a toga, but as a man of trade, of travel. He had seen the Nile flood its banks, leaving life in its wake. He had navigated the Aegean Sea, feeling the deck of his ship rise and fall on a living, breathing expanse. He watched the rain fall from the heavens and vanish into the earth, only to reappear as a spring, a river, a tear. He saw the world not as a collection of separate objects, a rock here, a tree there, a man standing apart, but as a single, flowing conversation. And in that conversation, every participant was speaking the same mother tongue, water. He saw that the rock, seemingly so solid and eternal, was not alien to the cloud, so soft, so transient. The cloud condenses into rain. The rain wears down the mountain. The minerals of the mountain are carried to the sea, and from the sea, mist rises again to become the cloud. The rock is just a slower, more patient form of the river. The oak tree is not a thing that merely needs water. It is a shape that water has chosen to take for a season, drawing itself up from the soil, becoming leaf and bark and acorn, before returning to the cycle. And you, lying there in the dark, what are you? You are a vessel, a walking, breathing estuary where the ocean of the outside world meets the intimate sea within. Think of the water inside you. It is not merely contained by you. It is you. It carries the electrical whispers of your thoughts along the rivers of your nerves. It fills the cells that remember, that feel, that yearn. The tears you shed are not just saline solution. They are the inner ocean finding its way to the surface, a tiny personal rainfall of sorrow or joy. When you thirst, it is not just a signal from the body. It is the cosmos within you, recognizing its fundamental need to reconnect with the cosmos outside. To take a drink of water is to perform a silent daily sacrament, a reaffirmation of your kinship with the cloud, the glacier, the deep aquifer. This is the first truth Thales offered, not a fact, but a feeling of belonging, a philosophy of sleep. For when you see the world this way, the loneliness that can sometimes grip a human soul begins to dissolve. You are not a solitary thinker trapped in a bag of skin, looking out at a foreign universe. You are the universe, thinking. You are a temporary eddy in the great slow flow of things. A unique configuration, yes, a pattern of stunning complexity. But you are made of the same essential stuff as the starry void above. The same relationship that binds the raindrop to the river binds you to the galaxy. And so, as you drift towards sleep, feel that relationship. Feel the water within you settling. There is no need to hold on so tightly to the day's anxieties, to the sharp edges of your individual self. You can let them go because they were never truly solid to begin with. They are just temporary currents, ripples on the surface of your deeper, fluid nature. You are returning, for a few hours, to that weightless state, the first home, the silent ocean of being. And in that return, there is no need to be anything other than what you are, a necessary, beloved part of the whole, floating in the dark, connected to everything, forever. Chapter 11. Did a forgotten loneliness give birth to philosophy? There is a silence that comes before the first question. It is a different silence from the one we seek at the end of a long day. This is a vast, unbroken silence, a world without curiosity, a cosmos that simply is and never wonders why. Imagine the human mind in that primordial silence, surrounded by mysteries, the path of the sun, the crash of thunder, the growth of a seed, but seeing them only as powers to be feared or appeased. The gods were in everything, but they were distant, capricious, speaking only in threats and demands. The world was alive, but it was not intelligible. It was a spectacle of chaos, and the human being was a frightened spectator, alone in the audience of an incomprehensible play. Then, one evening, on a shore much like the one Thales walked, a different kind of loneliness took root. Not the loneliness of being small before a powerful universe, but the loneliness of being separate from it. A longing, not just for safety, but for understanding. A thirst, not just for water, but for the logic of water. This was the loneliness that gave birth to philosophy. It was the profound, aching sense that the universe could be spoken to, not prayed to, but questioned, and that it might, just might, answer in a language without words. Thales's declaration that all is water was not a retreat from this loneliness. It was the first brave attempt to bridge it. It was an act of immense intellectual empathy. He was looking at the world and saying, I will try to understand you from the inside out. I will assume you have a nature, a fundamental principle that is consistent and knowable. I will believe that you are not insane. This was the real rebellion, not the answer he proposed, but the ACT of proposing an answer based on observation and reason, rather than on myth and superstition. He was replacing the capricious will of the gods with a consistent, pervasive logos inherent in the very substance of reality. Think of the courage in that, to stand against the weight of centuries of tradition, against the priests and the poets, and to trust the evidence of your own eyes and the logic of your own mind. He was utterly alone in that stance. There was no school of thought to back him up, no scientific community to peer review his ideas. There was only a man, the stars, and a hunch, a deep intuitive feeling that the world was a unified, rational whole. His water was his first stumbling word in a new language, the language of science. It was an imperfect word, to be sure, but it was a start. It cracked the door open, and this, perhaps, is why his idea still whispers to us across the millennia. Because we all know that particular loneliness, the loneliness of a thought that has not yet found its echo, the loneliness of looking at a problem in our work, in our relationships, in our own hearts, and feeling that there is no answer, that it is all just chaos. Thales invites us to do what he did, to assume that there is a principle, a unifying thread, even if we can't quite see it yet, to have faith in the intelligibility of things, to believe that the universe is not trying to confuse us, that our own hearts are not entirely mysterious, that there is an underlying current, an arche, that, if we can only find it, will make sense of the swirling surface. So, as you lie in the quiet of your room, consider the problems you carry with you from the day, the misunderstandings, the frustrations, the things that seem random and cruel. What if, like Thales, you granted them a hidden consistency, not to excuse them, but to understand them? What is the water of that situation, the fundamental substance from which all the complexity flows? Often, we find it is something simple, a need for respect, a fear of loss, a longing for connection. When you find that core, the chaotic events around it often start to look like natural, almost inevitable transformations of that one primary element. The loneliness of the problem begins to dissolve because you have found a way to speak its language. You have built a bridge, and in that act, you join Thales on that moonlit shore, no longer a frightened spectator, but a quiet, courageous participant in a cosmos that is slowly, gently revealing its secrets. And so, we leave the lonely shore, not with an answer, but with a companion for the silence. And that companionship invites one final tender question, one that brings the cosmos not just into our minds, but into the very room where we sleep.